Hello. Today I'm going to talk about GitOps. GitOps uses a Git repository as a single source of truth for all infrastructure and application deployments. So today I'm going to walk you through an example project that I have, or more specifically, an example group of projects that I have, conveniently named GitOps Demo. So what's in this repository or in this group? Just going to scroll down a little bit here and show you we've got a group structure that starts with the top level group called GitOps Demo. It's got multiple projects and subgroups underneath. So we've got a project just for a README, another one called GitLab Manage, a subgroup called Apps that has 4 projects underneath, or excuse me, 5 projects underneath, and another subgroup that has infrastructure called infra that has 3 projects underneath, one for AWS, one for Google Cloud, and one for templates. So what does this consist of? What does this look like? So at its most basic form, GitLab is the single source of truth powered by Git to store all of the information we need to deploy the infrastructure and the applications. Everybody uses GitLab as a single source of truth for collaboration, for priorities, issue tracking, and all changes. Those changes are then automated either for infrastructure through Terraform, using Terraform Cloud as a state repository, or directly to Kubernetes via Helm to deploy application pods. So let's take a quick look at this. Let's say we are in infrastructure and we want to have a new task here. So let's jump into our first place that we go is check our board. So what I'd like to do is go back to my GitOps demo board here. I'm going to take a look at my issue board. And if I'm on the infrastructure team, I'll be able to see all of the issues assigned to me that have my tag on it, infra. Looks like I've got a new issue here to scale the cluster up to 5 nodes. So let's put that into the doing column. Click on it. And I'm going to assign myself to this task. I'm going to create a merge request because I plan on changing something. And I'm going to open up my web IDE. This is going to bring me into my infrastructure as code. So my task, if I forgot it, I can see my merge request information here. I am going to open up my Kubernetes cluster configuration. I'm going to see that I've got an existing cluster size of 2. I'm going to change this to 5. Commit this. Visually inspect my changes. Commit it. I'm going to commit it to a new branch. Change Kubernetes node scale to 5. I'm going to stage and commit that. All of my changes have been committed. So I'm going to go back to my repository. And check out my automation. Looks like I've got a couple of new tasks here. It's going to validate and run a Terraform plan. So let's look at my merge request. Can see that I've got a job running here. All my changes are tracked here. I'll be able to discuss this with any of my colleagues. Also have anybody do any types of review. If I need approvals, I can assign an approver. When the automation is complete, Terraform will actually indicate to me what it's going to change. Looks like we're going to change the auto-scaling workers. We're going to add a couple of configuration files and add a local file as well. All right. I think this is looking pretty good. When this pipeline succeeds, I'm going to go ahead and merge it. Merge it. Delete my source branch, which is going to automatically close out my ticket. Can see that my issue is now closed. So now it's off my backlog. Let's take a look at this as it deploys into production. Okay, so Terraform is going to go through a process of validating, planning, and applying. And when this is complete, the scale of my cluster will be completed. Let's take another look at a project while we're here. So we want GitLab to be the single source of truth for everything. So what about GitLab itself? So with the power of Terraform, we've created a project called GitLab Manage. GitLab Manage is actually managing GitLab itself, its projects, its groups, its permissions, all within Terraform code itself. Using CI/CD, it uses the GitLab API to invoke all of those stated actions. So let's take a look what that looks like. So if I go into the groups file, I can see that I've got two main groups here, one called apps and one called infrastructure. I've given it a visibility level of public and a description appropriate. Can also see my members of my group. In this case, I've only got a single member, myself, who has the access level of owner. And my projects. So here's all my projects listed out with their permissions, what groups they belong to, what their names are, and their descriptions. This allows me to make sure that everything is managed as code. It runs in the same manner using CI/CD and Terraform to deploy all those changes. Now, I'm not going to make a change right now, but this is how I created all of our groups and our subgroups within this demo environment. I'm going to go back and check on my infrastructure. Looks like it's continuing to run. We'll look at that in a little bit. Let's move on to applications. So I'm going to go into my apps group. I'm going to see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 applications. And what I'd like to do is jump into my operations dashboard and take a look at these. So I've got all of my groups up here, or all of my projects up here. Looks like I've got app 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I've got my 2 infrastructure. You can see my AWS is running here, and I get a nice little status. Doing nothing in Google Cloud right now. And the last time that I deployed these applications, they all passed. This one gave me a little bit of a warning. I can click into this quickly to see what the latest warning is. Looks like I had a security scan that didn't quite pass correctly. So we'll have to look at that later. This high-level overview and ability to jump between projects. I've also got a failed project here as well. I know exactly what this is. I'm still working on this. I'm getting my Python app to deploy into the cloud. I need to add some specific code to the deployment chart itself. So let's take a look at another application. I'll take my ASP application. Want to see what the current metrics are here in the production environment. We'll give this a second. Immediately I can see my error rates, my latency rates, and my throughput. You can see I've got one instance here into production. I can click on this to either monitor it, deploy to it, can even jump into a terminal directly into Kubernetes. to take a look at anything that I might need to see in regards to this application running. I've also got this application up here in my GitOps demo domain and seeing those that application run nicely. Go back to my operations page. If I wanted to check out any other applications, for example, if I wanted to see my Ruby application, I could see this in the exact same manner. Here's my metrics for this particular application. Can understand my latencies and error rates. Oops. Just looked at metrics, and I can open up this live environment as well. Here's my Rails application. All right, so let's go back to our main group of applications. What do we see at the group level here? Well, first off, we see a roll-up of all of the open issues, epics that apply to these this subgroup. Also, I get a nice consolidated security dashboard. So for the security professionals, GitLab becomes the single source of truth for all open and currently vulnerable issues found in my applications, classified by severity and confidence level. I could also see a trend. Currently, I've only got a short period of time here, but ideally, we'd like to see this trend downward over time, over 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, etc. From here, I can dive into any one of these issues, can see which project it's associated to. So this is in the Ruby application. This one's in my ASP. Here's another one down here in Spring. When I click into this, I can get some nice information about the security vulnerability itself. Also links to more information about this vulnerability and how to resolve it. Could also create an issue or dismiss this vulnerability, depending on what I need to do. If I want to create an issue and put it on the backlog, one click allows me to do that, and from this centralized screen. Now, this is across all applications. If I wanted to see it specifically to one application, I could obviously drill down into the application itself, go to the corresponding security dashboard, and see the same information, but just scoped specifically to this one application. So this way, teams and groups can see their both consolidated issues or project-specific issues. Going to go back to my applications here. What I'd like to talk about is multi-cloud for a second. So multi-cloud is the ability to deploy your applications to any cloud with very little effort. So because we're using Kubernetes here, we've got Kubernetes in 2 locations. We've got Kubernetes in Google Cloud and Amazon Cloud. Should be pretty easy to move this over. Let's see if we can do this. So the first thing I'd like to do is start with a project and an epic to consolidate all my tasks. So I can keep everything in front of me without having to have too many issues. So I see here that I've got some tasks, some issues that apply to each one of my applications. So I've got one for my Ruby app, one for my Spring app, one for my ASP app, etc. Well, the first thing I need to do actually is adjust some infrastructure. So I'm going to see, as an infrastructure professional, what do I need to do? So I'm going to go back to my epics here. We're going to promote GKE to the primary. Today, everything is going into EKS, but we're going to move this over and redeploy all of our applications to GKE. So the first thing I need to do is change the scope so GitLab knows how to deploy applications. So I'm going to change the scope of AWS. And for example, let's see, I'm going to create my merge request, open up my web IDE, and I'm going to go into my GitLab configuration here. I'm going to change my environment scope from everything to, let's say, we're going to call it old. We'll commit this, create a new branch, change, deploy scope to old, stage and commit this. All changes have been committed. Our pipelines here. Okay, we've got 2 running. Looks like my scaled cluster job has passed. So we've got a scale of 5 there. Let's go back to our merge request. Visually validate my change here. Wait for Terraform to indicate what it's going to change so we know Terraform is in sync with the Git repository. Those results will be posted back into the merge request. Here we go. It looks like it's going to modify the cluster. Okay, and add some local authentication files. That's fine. So we're going to delete the source branch and merge when the pipeline succeeds. It's already done. Going to merge and commit that. Okay. So this is now completed. We've changed our environmental scope there. Let's go back to our issues list. Looks like I've got to promote Google Cloud here. So I'm going to create a merge request here. I'm going to open my web IDE. I'm going to change my environment scope here to star, which means that it's going to take any untagged workloads. Commit that. Validate that. Commit. Update scope to star. Stage and commit that. All changes have been committed. Go back to my merge request. We'll let this run. Let's see. Could also see it from my operations dashboard here. And it looks like the last run on Google Cloud is passed. We're still running on AWS. Okay, we're going to modify the GKE cluster. That looks good. We're going to merge that. Let that merge into master and make the changes as well. So let's take a look at the AWS cluster. Take a look at the pipeline here. Looks like it's currently applying. Let's check on the status. Still deploying out. So where is this going to go? So what is this actually doing? Let's take a quick look at that. Let's take a step back and take a look at this. We'll look at the group cluster configuration here. So what this is it's leveraging the GitLab API, the Terraform resource provider for GitLab specifically, to create a group cluster. That group cluster is called AWS cluster, and it's going to add this cluster into the group, specifically the group for the demo apps. So GitLab/apps. So let's take a look at that. Go back to the main group here. Let's look at the apps group and look at our Kubernetes configuration. Here's the two environments that we have. Oh, it looks like EKS is finished here. It's now got an environmental scope of old, and GKE is still in dev. That's okay. My applications are still running here. No problem. Still running in EKS. All looking good. Go back to my cluster here. Give this a second. We could even check on it from our operations dashboard. Can see the cloud for GCP is still running. So once this is done, oh, there we go. Looks like it just completed. Yep. All right. So now this is completed. Go back to my list of issues here. Looks like what I'm going to need to do is take a look at and start to change my applications, redeploy my applications to the new cloud provider. So I've already changed the priority. So now GitLab will deploy to Google instead of Amazon. So let's pick one off the top here. I'm going to just need to redeploy here. Okay. Because I'm not making any code changes, I actually don't even need to open a merge request. What I am going to do is run the pipeline again, but not for the Python one that's not working. I'm going to rerun the pipeline. Just current master, no changes to my application. It's going to go through a number of steps here. It's actually going to build the container. There should actually be no changes here. It's going to retest the application. And then it's going to roll out incrementally into production at these intervals, 10%, 25, 50, 100, and then run a performance test on it as well. So this, after this is done, should actually change the location of my application and where it's running. We can see that this is still on EKS. I've got a subdomain here just for EKS, so we'll see if that changes. Okay, we're going to have to give that some time. Why don't we do all of these at once? Why don't we get pretty confident here? My Spring application and my Ruby application. I'm going to run all these. I'm going to leave the Python application where it is. Like I said, not working today. All right. I took a look at my operations dashboard here. You can see I've got 3 of my applications running. Once these pipelines complete, they will be in the new environment. I'm going to pause the video until these deploy. All right, we're back. Looks like it took a few minutes here to deploy into the new infrastructure. All of the applications have been moved over. I got one last one that's finalizing a task here. So let's jump in and take a look at it. Let's start with the Spring application. So if I jump into my Spring application, I can see that I went through the build process. I did all of my code quality, container scanning, all of my security scans. I deployed it into production and I ran a performance analysis on that. So let's try it out. Let's see if we can get to this new environment here. It says I'm up. I've got a single pod. I'm going to open the live environment and there's my application running on GKE. Take a look at the metrics here. Get some performance data, latency data, etc. If I needed to, I could jump right into the terminal. Let's take a look at the next app. That was Spring. Let's take a look at the Ruby application. My pipeline's passed. Let's take a look. Okay, I've got my running pod here. Gonna launch it. There's my Rails application running on Google Cloud, Google Kubernetes. I need to see my metrics here. Click on that. Get all of my latency metrics, throughput metrics, etc. And let's take a look at the operations dashboard and see. Okay, looks like my ASP application passed with some warnings. Looks like one of my license management tasks might have failed. Not sure what happened there. We'll look at that later. Let's take a look at my operations and see what kind of environments we have. Got another instance up. I'm going to open up the live environment here. And boom, here's my ASP.NET application running on Google Cloud. So there we go. In a short period of time, I was able to provision my infrastructure with Amazon EKS, Google Kubernetes. I made a change to the application or to the infrastructure by increasing the capacity of the EKS server. I was able to redeploy all my applications from EKS, where it started, into Google Kubernetes. I did this by managing my entire workflow through issues and epics with full visibility to the entire business stakeholders. And I was able to monitor my application and do everything with GitLab, and Git is the single source of truth. The only thing I left up to do in my migration is to close out my issues. So I'm going to go back to my epics and my issues. So let's see, I moved my, redeploy and test for my .NET application. That one's good. So I'm going to close this issue. Spring. That one looks good. I'm going to close that issue. Ruby. That one looks good. I'm going to close this issue. And I know that I've still got a problem here with my Python application, so I'm going to leave that open here. If I were a business stakeholder, I could come into the group level, take a look at my my goals, which were to migrate my application. So let's look at my issue board here. My infrastructure tab's got nothing left on it. Let's take a look at my multi-cloud board here. Probably should have followed those, added those appropriate labels for doing and to do and doing, but they're already closed out. So here's all my closed applications. Still got one item on my backlog. That's my Python move, but we'll do that later. Well, I hope you found this interesting. This is the GitOps demo. Thank you for your time.